I had the best time sitting down with the co-chairs of Nantucket by Design, Bill Richards from Gary McBurney and Marla Sanford from Marla Design Group. We talked all about the rich history and charm of Nantucket, discussing what makes the island so special and how it continues to inspire designers and visitors alike. We also talked about the event, highlighting its significance, the unique experience it offers, and how it celebrates the island's storied past while embracing the contemporary design. We laughed our way through this episode. We had such a great time, and I hope that you enjoy this. Welcome to Grandma's Silver, where tradition meets today. I'm Allie, your host and the founder of the Grand Millennial Lifestyle. Here, we blend aesthetics with nostalgia, engaging in conversations with lifestyle brands, designers, and more to rediscover the timeless charm of the past. Join me as we journey from home to heart, illuminating the past and polishing the present with the gleam of Grandma's Silver. Marla and Bill, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. I would like to just kind of pass this over to the two of you because I think before we launch into the excitement that is Nantucket by Design, I would love to talk just briefly about the setting and your backgrounds and how you became involved with the Historical Association and Nantucket by Design in general. So Marla, did you want to take the lead?
Sure. Marla Sanford here. I have been coming to Nantucket since I was 2 years old. I grew up in a suburb outside of Philadelphia near the main line. And this is where my family and I would come in the summertime started as 1 week, then it ended up as 2, then 3. Then next thing you know, it became our main place. And so that's really was my introduction as a little girl coming to Nantucket. This was back when there was only the slow ferry. So things were a little different back then. The trek up here was a lot of fun. So that was my introduction to Nantucket. When I left college, I moved to New York City, where I lived for a little while. And then I eventually moved up to Boston, which was my greatest blessing because it allowed me very quick access to Nantucket. So I had been continually coming to Nantucket in the summertime, but now that I was able to access Nantucket all year round, I took a lot of advantage of that. Currently, my current job, what I do for a living is interior design. I do commercial and residential. Most of my projects are on Nantucket. So that kind of happened, I guess, by design, by location design. And about 8 years ago, or 7, maybe it was about 7, I joined the NHA Board of Trustees. And I was one of the youngest members to be inducted on the board. And it was I was very honored to be a part of the NHA and everything that it does for Nantucket. And that is what got me eventually introduced to Nantucket by Design, because I was sort of right when I joined the board of the NHA was about the time that Nantucket by Design was a new idea and concept that we were bringing to life. So I've sort of been a part of it from its inception to what it is now.
My name is Bill Richards, and just like Marla, I am a partner in an interior design firm based in Boston. My first trip to Nantucket was in 1991. I grew up north of Boston, so when I was a kid and you went on summer vacation, we went north rather than south. So it wasn't until I was a bit older that I first traveled to Nantucket. Since that time, my partner and I have purchased a number of homes on the island. We do a lot of work on the island, so it does factor into a big part of my life. I have 2 daughters who have been vacationing with me on the island for years. One of them was married at our house in 2019. She's coming up on her 5th anniversary tomorrow, actually.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of a nice family moment. My involvement with Nantucket by Design began in 2017. It's when the designer dinner parties were first introduced, and I was asked to host a dinner party. It was a lot of fun, and it just became something that grew and grew and grew. We started off with maybe 24 people, and this year I think we're up to 44 people on the lawn. It's been a great experience. Chairing the event has been very rewarding too. It's been a busy year. You can imagine putting together an event like this. It starts right when the last event ends. And it's weekly meetings, it's contacting designers, it's contacting sponsors. It's been a lot of work, but we're expecting a really great event this year.
From what I've seen, it looks incredible. I think the best place to start with this, because there's a lot to talk about, is if you could give us a little bit of an explanation or background on the event itself. And for those who are unfamiliar with Nantucket by Design, why it's so important and special.
So Nantucket by Design started probably about 7 to 8 years ago. It was actually an extension of our involvement with the Nantucket Antique Show, which had been a huge event on Nantucket for probably 30 years. It was one of the bigger events on Nantucket at the time. This was before, Nantucket was so busy and we have all these different, now there's an event a day. But this was back when it was one of the premier events on Nantucket, and the NHA had been involved with that event for, I think, since its inception as well. About 7 years ago, we decided to sort of start to expand on that as the island got busier, and there was this opportunity to sort of bring in more features related to design and the arts. And it started out a lot smaller, so it's definitely been an evolution in a good way. So when we first started, I think it was one night, 2 parties, maybe a panel. And the idea then was to, again, extend into the arts and into design and bring in more interior designers and talk about the influence of Nantucket design on design in general. The history of Nantucket and its impact on design was a pretty obvious thing, right? We had this Nantucket Antique Show that was very robust and very popular. And this was a way to kind of expand on that, bring in some more industry leaders and start to build off of that by introducing some panels and talking about different sectors of design. The first year, a lot smaller. Like I said, one day, one party, maybe a couple panels, and that was it. And it became popular right away. People loved it because there were a lot of industry leaders that really wanted to obviously come to Nantucket, explore it, understand it from its real authentic and natural way. And so over the next 5 to 6 years, we just kept tacking on as it got more popular, right? So the next thing you know, it was 2 days, 3 days, and we were bringing in multiple industry leaders and creating different topics for panels. Unfortunately for us, the pandemic hit, which sort of had an impact on the event because it was sort of right in its, it was skyrocketing. We were doing amazing and building momentum and excitement. And then like everything else and like everybody else experienced, unfortunately, that brought us that anchored it, right? Suddenly we had to pivot and figure out ways to get creative with keeping people interested and excited, but in a virtual way. So we did have sort of this 2-year holding pattern where we were more virtual. I would say last year, and maybe a little bit the year prior, but last year was really our first real, we're coming back and we're coming back in a bigger, better way. This year, with Bill and I as co-chairs, one of the things that we were really set on doing was figuring out a way to better structure all of that and really carve out these themes, really, focus on theming the event and having this all so that each industry leader can really tie back to a specific topic. And this year it's going to be craftsmanship, which we think is really exciting and speaks very much to Nantucket and Nantucket history.
Because Marla had touched on the fact that the event really initially focused on Nantucket and its impact on the design world. This year, what we've done is on the very first day and the very first 2 sessions, we're focusing on Nantucket craft and design and how it's been brought forward into the contemporary world. We're also talking about other challenges that we face in the design world in places like Nantucket with coastal resilience. So we have a panel on collaborating in these changing times. It involves, what it's like to be the architect when the water's rising, what it's like to be the designer when there's more moisture in the house, what it's like to be the landscape architect when you know that previously land that wasn't flooded is going to be flooded every winter with salt water and basically killing whatever you might have put in prior to this point. So I think it's really going to be interesting.
Yeah, that's actually almost a unique preservation piece
Correct.
to it, right? Yeah, that's really interesting.
But that's really who the NHA is.
Marla, when was the NHA founded?
So the NHA was founded in 1894, and it was founded really as a cultural safeguard for the island. They were a leader in that. They were created to help preserve what was some of the most incredible architecture that was still intact from the 16th and 17th century. That preservation element to this is still strung through everything that they do. Obviously over time, they've also expanded. But preservation is really at the core of what they do. And so it's really important to us and to the organization that we're weaving that storyline in, that we make sure we touch on the importance of that, and in a modern way, because that's changing. Every year it changes, like Bill's touching on.
Marla and I pre-recording, we're just talking about our shared roots. We're both from the Philadelphia mainline area. And coming from this area, I've always been very interested in preservation. We have lots of old properties and buildings, and there's a lot of cultural heritage in this region.
Yes.
I think people tend to not recognize the interconnectedness between a lot of these industries.
Yes.
So I think that the way that Nantucket by Design is approaching that and educating people in a way that appeals to them, but also gets that point across
that is exactly
that information is brilliant.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It was one of the reasons that we had started to expand on the antique show, right? I mean, that's the antique show is an old legacy. And I think it's really important for all of these organizations, and not just organizations, but industries, like the industry of antiques, right? Just as a business, is figuring out how to bring yourself into the modern world and talk to younger generations about why this is so important, because you can't have this without that. The NHA is all about storytelling. I mean, that is the fundamental purpose, is that they preserve to tell the stories, and they have to constantly figure out ways to reposition so that they can continue to tell their stories decade to decade, because we are vastly different than we were just 8 years ago. It's really interesting. And I think it's just really important, especially for organizations that are strictly in preservation and conservation.
Nantucket also has sort of a unique history with whaling, in that when the whaling industry fell away due to the discovery of petroleum, the island sort of went to sleep for a bit. So hence you have all of the architecture and stuff remaining untouched. Pretty much Main Street in the downtown area very much has the look and feel that it might have, 150 years ago.
Yeah,
Right.
I think in 1966, Nantucket was deemed a national landmark because of that. I mean, it's people don't realize, for such a small island, just how big we are in terms of natural history, in terms of architectural history. And I mean, I think over 50% of this island is conservation property.
I was just about
Yeah. So, these are the unique experiences when you come here. This is why people fall in love with it. This is part of the magic of it, is, there's this island 30 miles out to sea. You can only get here two ways, either by boat or ferry or by flight. We don't have stoplights. We have heavy restrictions on commercial leasing. Our downtown looks like it's stuck in time with its cobblestone streets. And, these are really special aspects of this island. And I think that's part of the global intrigue. I think that's what has helped make this event so big and so nationally recognized at this point, is because, once you come here, you never forget it. You sort of fall in love with it over and over again. There's so much here to learn and to understand about how impactful this island was on our, international trade. This is a really fun fact. I think we have 1,000 artifacts in the Whaling Museum, but that's only 8% of what is actually in our vault.
That's crazy.
And the Whaling Museum is pretty big, right, Bill? It's pretty big space, but that's wild. I mean, we've had that much of an impact.
One thing we're trying to do too, because when people come away to a conference, or more or less, you picture being in a room for the duration of the conference, so you really don't get to experience much of the island. we've kind of changed the format a little bit. So in addition to the panels, because there are panels, 2 panels a day, there's interim periods where we're trying to use the historical properties. Every day, for example, at the Hadwin House, there's a welcome center. The Hadwin House is one of the famous houses on Main Street. There were the 3 bricks for the sons and the 2 wooden houses for the daughters. But there'll be a welcome in the garden every morning. Then over at the 1800 house, there'll be crafts, that sort of thing happening. In the evening, we have social events planned at different private homes, so people get a chance to see, what it looks and feels like when you're not in a conference room. So I think it's gonna be exciting.
The combination of permitting people to experience Nantucket makes it all the more special because it's sort of this tourism.
I think it's a really important word. I think that it's gotten a bad rap. And the truth is, Nantucket has always been a tourist destination. I mean, that's what has made it what it is today. And I think that's what's created such a collaborative community, just such a collaborative community.
But one of the things too, because I mean, typically tourism results in exactly the same kind of thing that happened to Marla or myself, which is you come to visit, but then you find a way to stay. So one of the things that, there's always a lot of housing issues going on, especially with newer houses. What we're hoping to do is, and this is just one tool that we have, is when we introduce people to the architecture and the crafts of Nantucket, we are hoping that when they build their houses, they'll incorporate something that gives it a sense of place, in that it's not some generic box that could be in any other beach community in the country. And we're certainly not suggesting people turn their homes into museums. I mean, that wouldn't be all that comfortable to sit around and write. But a piece of brown furniture, something, whether it's a basket, whether it's a sailor's valentine, something that just gives the house some gravitas. You know where you are, and it just somewhat pays homage to the history that has taken place here.
And that's really important. I think that's happening so many places.
I am so sorry about all that
noise.
That's actually when our ticket sales come in.
No problem. Bill, going off what you said, the sense of place, I think, is honestly so important. And I think to introduce people to folks who are able to provide upgrades that are reproduction, or they know what they're doing with a historic property, or if they're building, they can make it fit into the setting. We see a lot of that in this area, that things look very out of place. I sat on my own local historic commission, and I think I've told this story in a previous interview, but I'm in a tiny little, I'm outside of it now, but my original hometown, which is all of 10 minutes away, was a small mill town. And so there's a lot of historic preservation guidelines there, and they don't welcome, every wah-wah, which is a very popular thing out here. But, you can't just plop whatever you want down, which I appreciate. And I know a lot of people get frustrated with that, right? Because they see it as perhaps like a lack of ability to modernize, but you can modernize and grow in a respectful way that makes sense. And there was a country club that more of a golf club that they built locally. And I'll never forget sitting in the meeting for the clubhouse. And I just remember sitting there thinking, this looks like, I am in a historic little town in suburban Philadelphia, and it looked like a Tommy Bahamas. And in Florida or somewhere coastal, that would be great. But it just looked so ridiculous in the middle of this field. I'm 40 minutes from the Amish country. It looked so out of place. And it's that same idea that where if you look at the Jersey Shore now, it's like the Outer Banks, because all these little tiny historic properties have just, and now they're selling for millions of dollars because they just want the land. And so it's just, again, it just looks a bit ridiculous, and it lacks that historic integrity, to be honest, when folks are doing that.
That's a great word.
We had that issue on Nantucket in the 70s. There was a development put in on the far end of the island that was very out of character for Nantucket, and that's really when the NHA really developed its roots and started not the NHA so much as the HDC, the Historic District
That was
Commission.
the HTC.
But just in keeping the character of the island
Mhm.
intact. Nantucket has the history. It's not just whaling. It has its fingers all over the place. So feminism was big on Nantucket, and partly because you had a Quaker community that really saw gender more as gender equality was more of an issue. But then when the whaling people went out to sea, the women were left in charge of the commerce. So you had a lot of women-owned businesses on the island, which the tradition continues today.
Wow. But you touched on integrity, and I think that's really important because, especially as it relates to what we're talking about here with Nantucket by Design and the NHA, because not only do the proceeds of the event go to the NHA, but the event itself is it's a very important educational element to everything that we're discussing about the integrity of the island, the stories of the island, the authenticity of the island, and just figuring out different ways to weave in all of those important aspects of who we are here on Nantucket and why we have such a bigger impact, even though our island is only 14 miles long.
Oh, it's funny. Marla used the word weave. One of the things that people are surprised to learn about Nantucket too is we have a huge cottage industry in weaving. A lot of the carpets and blankets that you see in the stores are made on the island. And it's kind of a nice way if you're not really into brown furniture, you don't want to be all that traditional. Some of these hand woven rag rugs, for example, they're beautiful and they fit in a very contemporary decor.
I did not know that personally, so that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it's just another way that you can incorporate something that you may not have thought was representative of the island into your decor, and it's very Nantucket.
It's why Nantucket is such a perfect backdrop for exploring the theme of craftsmanship, just because we have such a long history in craftsmanship and workmanship.
Can I ask really quickly, or could we talk briefly about the audience? It's not strictly an industry professional event. The general public who is interested in design, architecture, preservation are invited to purchase tickets. And
I would say that more than half, right, Bill, of people that are actually attending our events are non-industry leaders.
Okay.
They're and some can even be enthusiasts and aren't necessarily even here full time. I mean, they will literally come over for day trips. So it can be an enthusiast that happens to be here in the summer or an enthusiast that happens to be here for the week. Or we have a lot of people who know about the event in advance and will actually plan a trip sort of around this so that they can attend a couple panels. Yeah.
It's funny because we moved our date this year, and we used to be in August and now it's in mid-July, July 15th to 18th. And whenever you change a date, you're always worried, am I going to lose people? Am I going to gain people? But the general feeling was that the date was an improvement because the last 2 weeks of July, first 2 weeks of August tend to be the big family vacations. So we were on the very beginning cusp of that, which people felt was helpful and allowed them to attend.
That's
so
great.
Fingers crossed we did the right thing.
Well, from what I've seen so far, it seems very successful. I've seen a lot of sold out on the website.
A lot of sold out.
Yeah, that's, I think, a good sign and a good indicator for you. On that note, could we talk a little bit about what folks can expect this year, who some of your industry experts are, some of your panelists, some of the events that people will be able to attend?
So some of our big speakers are Ken Folk, Mark Sykes, Meg Braff, Victoria Hagan, Kent Kemp, Mary McDonald, Aaron Lauder. And we also have a lot of local artisans and designers. That's really important for us too, is to really have some panels that are focused on local community members who are also making big waves. We're going to use this kind of wording in design. It's a pretty packed schedule.
The other thing that's kind of fun too is we had a lot of interest from the media to be sponsors. So we have New England Home, we have Veranda, we have Town and Country,
Boston Home,
which was a new one this year.
Modern Luxury Interiors.
I mean, it's just such a perfect blend. Like, you couldn't have crafted a better itinerary.
We did put a lot of thought into this.
We did.
Mhm.
And we also, I don't know if you saw this, but one of our sort of unique partners this year is the Colony Hotel in Palm
Mhm.
Beach. And we did sort of this really fun reciprocal kind of, we pop up there, they pop up here. And Bill and I are planning and hoping to expand on that road to Nantucket by Design throughout the entire year. So the wonderful, beautiful thing about this that we've come to learn about people that love Nantucket, even if you've only been here once, there's just something about it that stays with you. I don't know if it's the experience or just the history and story and the feeling that you get when you're here, but there's just something about it. And we have found that, especially with this event and really getting engrossed in the community and with all of those guests and transient guests, is that they want to see us more. They want to see Nantucket more throughout the year. So we've come up with this concept of Nantucket by Design on the road. And we did our first one this winter down in Palm Beach, and it was really successful and a lot of fun. And our hope is to take this educational aspect of design and unique, format and pop up in other places. So the hope is that, maybe you'll see us in Greenwich, maybe New York. We'll definitely be going back down to Palm Beach. And I think people have really enjoyed the ability to see us again or to see Nantucket again.
No, it was funny. Palm Beach was the first, as Marla said, it was the first one that we did. And we actually had a lot of requests for merch. People want Nantucket Palm
Love
Beach
merch.
hats and t-shirts and all that stuff. So who knows? Maybe you'll see that next year.
Well,
Oh,
it's
that's
funny
fun.
about these locations. I think it's such an interesting part of this, that how attached people get to the places that evoke certain feelings in them.
Mhm.
And they become really important, almost like, parts of who they are, and the ability to be able to express that outwardly, as sort of that their own biography. This is where I love to be, right? That
Mhm.
somehow that defines who you are and what you love. And that has been really interesting, right, Bill? Is just as we meet more people, them saying, we are Nantucket ride or dies, but we're also here, and there's a lot of other ride or dies there. So please come see us, and that's exciting.
Well,
And I
and
think that's such an interesting human element to this sort of
Yeah.
nature about just who we are and how we define ourselves.
because the funny thing too is I think people who find Nantucket tend to be people who appreciate special places.
Mhm.
So when they return home, generally they're returning home someplace pretty special as well.
Exactly.
So
Mhm.
in Palm Beach, for example, it was the panel discussion was really interesting because just as we touched on earlier about trying to incorporate a sense of place when you're building a home, that sort of thing, the people in Palm Beach, where they've had a great influx of people, especially since the pandemic, they're feeling a little bit the same way. They don't want to see just these rando houses go up. They're looking for people to get in their car, drive around, look at the architecture, understand what makes this place special, and add to that.
Yes.
Don't ignore it.
Exactly. To love it the way they do and not forget. And I think that that's why these organizations in each of these communities are so important, because if there isn't an organization out there somehow preserving the story and preserving the history and preserving its impact on not just history, but also how it makes us feel. I think about it all the time. Like, what if this organization like the NHA or even the Nantucket Conservation, that's just, conserving actual land, what if that didn't exist? What would that experience feel like for all of us when we came here? It wouldn't be anything like it. And so I think if you come to a place like Nantucket or even like a Palm Beach as a quote newbie, right? And maybe you don't have the historical background, you're still seeing and sensing and feeling something that's really important and has actually been well maintained. But I can't tell you how many people I meet. I mean, that literally are generational Nantucket visitors. Maybe they don't live here all year round, but even people that do, that are still learning about,
Mhm.
all of this history. That's cool. That's interesting. But it's also important for them to understand that that's likely why they are falling in love with it so much and why it's having such an impact on them. And if it just suddenly disappeared or without it, what would that look like? Would we want the hat? I don't know.
Right.
Would I want the hat that says Nantucket and Palm Beach or Nantucket and, New York, or I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't, because I wouldn't be surrounded by all of this incredible visual architecture, art, stories, baskets.
What I think is really interesting is it couldn't be done more perfectly that the two of you are co-chairing this, and I can't speak to past events. I imagine most folks who are in this position or rotate out and are also kind of in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
But what you do professionally is help people to evoke that feeling in their spaces and in their environment, right?
Very true.
So I think it shows in the planning and execution of the event, because you're carrying that knowledge that a lot of other folks, I mean, when I was planning events, we have to do the same thing, right? Like people want to recreate certain things and you're like, we don't have the budget for that. It doesn't make sense. You got to do different things. And it was like, well, do you really, or do you just want the feeling, hearing you talk about how folks are feeling so connected to the feeling of Nantucket, because what you're doing, of course, you're planning this ancillary event that stems off of something much larger, but you're giving people the opportunity to stay connected to something important to them throughout, the year. And I think that's where you're hitting exactly the right mark, is because it's, even if they're not, or even if they're there in the summer and then you're visiting Palm Beach where maybe they're wintering, you're giving them the experience to reconnect to something that they love, as you mentioned. It's really unique. I think it's a beautiful thing. It's very unique. And I think you're hitting all the right notes that way. But your backgrounds, I think, probably are shaping that more than maybe you realize. I don't know if that's even accurate.
It's funny. I hadn't really thought of it.
No, I hadn't thought of it
until
either.
You said it. I hadn't quite thought of it that way.
It's true. When you design a room, right? You're taking the things that your client loves, or you're taking the idea of how they like to live, or what's important to them, what's special to them. And that could be a color, or it could be a piece of furniture, an antiquity, something that's been handed down, or a new piece that they got that represents a moment in time. And it is about telling a story in a space and creating ancillary area to which will evoke a feeling when you're in it. And that's why, and Bill can probably speak to this too, because he does so many incredible different types of designs. I mean, Bill will also design boats, in case you're wondering. But if you go room to room, right? Like even as designers, if you really are caring and giving a lot of thought to it, each room is supposed to feel different. And each room is supposed to have a specific role within that family dynamic or within that person's dynamic. Okay, over here is when I want to shut everybody out. And over here is where I want to be with everybody. And in here, this is sort of my museum room. This is the room that maybe tells the wildest story, but nobody's allowed to touch anything, right? I mean, you have all these different moments. The bedroom, I just want to feel tranquil because the world is so loud, So you're right. I hadn't thought about that in terms of how Bill and I together might be building out this event. And there's so many facets to that story. I mean, there's people would have no idea that on this little tiny island that we own and have the oldest running windmill in the country. Random fact, but there's people that are here all the time that might not even know that or understand that, but they might be driving by it. And that's probably still a moment for them, whether or not they understand what it is or not. So it's all these things are important.
The NHA does have a website which provides lots of information, but we also have a YouTube channel. It's called Nantucket History, and great stuff. There's videos of prior Nantucket by Design panels. There's the Rick Burns movie on Nantucket. There's craft videos. There's one that's a walk up Main Street highlighting the different architecture of different homes on Main Street, one in Sconset. So if anybody out there does have any interest in Nantucket, I would strongly encourage you to go to this YouTube channel, Nantucket History.
And I can link to that too in the show notes so that we can make sure it's easy for people to find. So
I'm a Nantucket geek. I'm always rewatching some of these. It's one of the special places in the world. It really is.
It really is.
Before we close out, I know that this year is a little bit different for you've done so many wonderful things, and part of that transition is that you have sponsors, and I want to make sure to give you the opportunity to give them a quick shout out. So Bill, did you want to speak to that?
I would, although I can't name we don't have the time for me to name every sponsor by name. I want to make sure that everyone knows that we do appreciate them, but I'd like to give a shout out to our two major co-sponsors, William Ravis Real Estate and Woodmeister Master Builders. When these two people signed on, then it was like dominoes. It really, their faith in us really helped make this event happen. So thank you very much.
For your other sponsors, I believe you have them listed on your website, which I will make sure, again, with the YouTube link, I will also link the website link so folks can take a peek at the incredible experience and sign up for as much as they can, would be my recommendation, because there is so much fun going on. Is there an opportunity to get on the mailing list for next year's information as well?
Oh, sure there is.
Sign up on the Historical Association's mailing list?
There's a button on the landing page of Nantucket by Design.
Okay.
That allows you to get on a mailing list so you can stay informed about what is going on for the next 12 months. Because NBD doesn't really end on the 18th. It really is only just getting started.
That's true. You have so many events too, and you're doing all these offshoot events.
Right.
So that is an incredible way to stay informed. And there are also social media channels. So we'll make sure all of those links are listed, as well as, if you are comfortable with it, I'll stick your business links in there so folks can follow you as individual professionals in the industry. I just thank you for taking the time to be here today. I'm very excited for you and for all the attendees this year, but just in general, to see what you're doing to help to preserve Nantucket and make folks more aware of how they can ensure they're doing their part as well.
Thank you.